Good morning. Steve and Ann Vanderhoof lived in Toronto, Canada. It turned out that they both worked for a magazine. She was the editor, he was a freelance artist. They both worked really hard, 10, 12 hours a day. They'd come home late at night and they would still be talking about the magazine and their work. It really did consume them. In the wintertime, when the winters were so cold in Toronto, they'd get there in the dark and they'd come home in the dark. And they found themselves really getting depressed just year after year. And so one night when they came home, they were sitting at home and Steve said to Ann, "We need to chuck this. We need to sail down to the Caribbean and just go sail away for a couple of years." Well, Ann could tell he was serious. And so she said, "Well, I really think that's a good idea. However, there are a couple of problems really that would face. Like, number one, I don't know how to sail. And number two, I really get afraid when the boat begins to heel. Number three, we're not going to have any way to pay our bills. And number four, we don't have a boat. Other than that, I think it's a great idea." Well, Steve took that as a resounding yes. Let's go do it. That's kind of how men are. Anne didn't really think she had said yes, but she really hadn't said no. Steve said, "We need a 5-year plan. We can do this." 5 years seemed like a long way away, so she decided not to buck the project. The plan was to pay down the mortgage, to rent out the house. It would generate some income, pay down the bills, take some sailing lessons. And so that's what they started to do. They had a recipe to figure this out. And sure enough, at the end of 4 years, they could tell they were going to need another 3. And so they made it a 7-year plan. And at the end of 7 years, the mortgage was paid off. And they'd rented the house. They had found a boat and they'd fixed it up. They'd named it Recipe, or Receta in Spanish. Since Anne loved to cook and Steve loved to eat, it seemed like a perfect thing. Receta. And finally they set sail. Everyone was saying, "What are you doing? What are they thinking? How quickly will they be back?" They started a betting pool at the office. How quickly would they be back? But they set sail. They went down the East Coast, and then they went over to the Bahamas, spent a couple months there, then over the Dominican Republic, and then all the way down to Puerto Rico, over to the Virgin Islands, and then on to St. Martin. And they would sail down through the Caribbean all the way to Grenada, and they spent 3 months in Grenada during the hurricane season. And then they sailed down to Trinidad, and they've been working their way all the way back up through the Caribbean, all the way back up to Toronto, Canada. They would be gone for 2 years. The experiences they would have were incredible. The things they learned, the things they enjoyed. And when they came home, Anne wrote a book entitled The Embarrassment of Mangoes. I have to tell you, it's actually one of my favorite books. To read their stories, the things they experienced, their joys, the heartaches, the learning, it was an incredible story. But the thing I loved was they started at the very beginning, and I want to read you what Anne had to say. It had really been hard for them to make that to leave, and she said, "In hindsight, we realized the hardest thing was making the decision to go." They had their dream. The hardest part was making the decision to go. It made me think about Mark Twain when he said, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones that you did. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. Right now during the coronavirus, when so often we've had to curtail the things we do, it's really a great time to stop and to rethink about your life. Maybe you're in your 20s and you're just beginning to dream about what you want your life to be. Maybe you've just retired and now you have your future in front of you and finally some time on your hands. I don't know what place you are in your life, but it's a great time to stop, to look at your life, and to think about those things you've always dreamed about doing. God is going to lead you into the future. We don't have to be afraid. So maybe it's time to throw off the bow lines. It's time to sail away. You know, the hardest part will be deciding to go. I hope you have a great day.